Hi, welcome to the Johnny B Show. This segment of the show is called The Spiritual Truth. And today's spiritual truth is entitled, Who is Greatest in the Kingdom of Heaven? This passage can be found in Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 9. I'm going to use the NIV version. But before I get into that, you know when you're a little kid hanging around the water fountain or a middle-aged man hanging around the cooler? General discussions where we talk about who's the greatest athlete in the world or who's the greatest world leader. Everyone wants to talk about who is great. Well, Jesus had a similar situation with his disciples. He knew his disciples were discussing amongst themselves who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And in Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 9, I would like to share that with you.
Beginning at verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He called a little child and had him stand among them, and he said, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like a little child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. But if any one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to sin. Such things must come, but woe to the man through whom they come. If your hands or your foot cause you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. If your eyes cause you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. Matthew 18, 1 through 9.
Now, I just finished reading the text, Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 9. Now, in order for us to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, we must first do 3 things. The first one is found in verses 3 through 4. You must be humble like little children. Second point is found in verses 5 through 6. We must be good examples towards our youth. And third is found in verses 7 through 9, is that we must avoid sin at all costs. Those are the 3 things that Christ pointed out in order to achieve greatness in the kingdom of heaven. Now, the first step in order to achieve who could be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So Christ states in verse 3, and he said, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, being humble like a child, especially for grown people, is very, very difficult to achieve. And Christ pointing out that we must be humble like little children is because he wants us to have appreciation for what God has created through all his wonders. Because when we're like little children, we have a genuine appreciation of what we see in, like, let's say, for the sunshine, the sky, the grass. We're fascinated on how awesome and amazing that is. And that's the type of humble attitude that Christ expects out of each and every one of us as we become older. But how much of us do we really appreciate what God has created? It could be as simple as, we take certain things for granted, like not having the right food, the right clothes. We constantly bicker. We always want more, 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 which is human nature, that we always want more. But Christ expects us to appreciate for what he has created. This is one aspect form of humility. Then Christ goes in verses 5 through 6. The Lord welcomes a little child like this in mine welcomes me. What Christ is saying right here is we should not hinder our youth for whatsoever. In fact, we should train our youth through the Bible and through setting good examples, which Christ's example number 2 is about. We need to set good examples. And Christ goes on to say, if we set bad examples in front of our youth, like if we cause our youth to sin because they see the way we act, then Christ states that that person is better off to tie a millstone around his neck and be thrown into the depths of the sea. Now, there's a lot of bad examples out there, but it is really bad when it comes from our Christian youth leaders. And you hear many poor stories about Christian youth leaders doing things that they should not be doing. Now, if it was up to me, if I was President of the United States, pretty much, regardless of anybody, if anyone harms a child or causes a child to do evil, he will be locked underneath a basement. He will never be able to see the sunlight. I will lock him so far in depths of the earth you wouldn't be able to recognize that he's here. But I'm ranting. I'm going to get back to the third point. The third point is when Christ talks about avoid a sin, he uses an analogy right here. He says, if your hands or foot cause you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. Well, whenever we sin in our lives, I don't think Christ necessarily refers to it physically that we actually do these things to ourselves, to harm ourselves. Well, Christ is talking about if there are certain things or people that causes us to sin, we should learn to avoid these things. Now, these 3 steps that Christ listed, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, are very, very, very difficult to task or accomplish. If you can do these 3 things, pretty much what Christ says, you'll be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. But how many of us could accomplish at least one of these things? If we could accomplish one of these things, we're doing pretty good. But to accomplish all 3 of them, that's a very, very difficult task, and very, very few people have ever accomplished, including myself. I'm thankful by God's grace that He died for the cross for my sins, and that, it was not by what I did or by my works, it's by what He did. And I thank God for His grace each and every day that He renewed a right spirit in me, and that He's very, very patient, and He's a patient and loving God. Now, I thank you once again for tuning into Spiritual Truths, and I am by no means a preacher or a great teacher of the Word. I try to, honestly study the Bible the best that I can, and stick with the truth as closely. And there's some things that I have not known yet, and that's okay because I don't have to know everything.